This video is on the rotate function in P5. It's a little trickier than you might think it would be to just rotate something using P5, and a fair few students end up using it. It also carries some weight with it. You need to know about these functions as well in order to utilize it correctly. But let's jump into it. I am using a duplicate of the P5.js starter files. I've just duplicated that folder, called it class 4b, and I've got my blank gray slab canvas happening. First thing I'm going to do is move the background over to my draw loop, just so when I do have stuff moving, I don't end up with some trails. Cool, and now let's draw a rectangle to start. So I'm going to put this in the middle of the screen, halfway across, halfway down, and make it sizable. I'm going to change the rect mode to center, so it's in the middle. Cool. Now let's just see what happens if I try and rotate this. So the rotate function just takes an angle in here. If I do a 1 degree or an angle of 1, let's see what happens. A bit strange. You might expect it to go from being in the middle to staying in the middle, but at a slightly different angle. But actually what happens is it rotates a lot and not by the center point of our rectangle. So the first thing to talk about is this angle in here is measured in radians by default. I don't know many people that like radians, so we're going to change the angle mode to degrees. So this just means now, instead of being I think it would be 2 radians equals 180 degrees, I think, maybe. Instead of doing that weird radian math, we can just write in 180 degrees if we want it to be upside down. Cool. So let's go 45 degree angle. And you'll see, you might notice it's actually rotating about the origin. So to illustrate that more clearly, I'm going to make a variable called r for, I guess, rotation, and start it at 0, and then just iterate that. Appreciate it, 1 every frame. So now we have an increasing angle, and yeah, you can see it's rotating about our origin, 0, 0, top left corner. So if we want to rotate it about the center point of the rectangle itself, we actually need to use this translate function. So what translate does is move our origin. So at the moment it's at 0, 0, but we want it to be where the middle of our rectangle is. So let's move it to halfway across the page and halfway down. But we'll see that this actually moves our rectangle as well, because now that we've translated the origin, our rectangle is drawn in respect to that new origin. So it's added another width across, half the width across, and another half the height down. So we've ended up actually starting in the bottom right corner. So to remedy that, we just want our rectangle to be at the new origin, which is 0, 0. And voila, we have a rotating rectangle. You also need to be careful of the order you do things in. Rotate function will affect anything below it. And then translate, same thing. It's just like styling. So you want to have it in this order for it to work correctly. If we were to put rectangle before rotate, it wouldn't affect the rectangle. So let's complicate this slightly. Let's say actually we wanted an ellipse to be drawn up here. You might think, okay, that's rotating. I'm going to do this separate thing now. I'm going to make an ellipse, top left corner, 100 in, 100 down, and I'm going to make it 50 pixels across. But it is now attached to a rectangle because we're still translated. Our origin is still in the middle of the screen. So the remedy for that, to get this in the top left corner of our canvas, we could do some math and then stop it rotating, but that's way too many complicated steps. We can use push and pop. So if I put push and pop either side of this, what's happening is push is saving all of the styling that we had before this point, it's putting it in the memory and pushing it to the side. Then we do whatever separate tasks we want to do, and then we pop back into that world we were in before. So, for example, we are, well, I guess the only thing we're doing here is translating the origin, but before this, the origin is at 0, 0. It saves that in memory, we translate it, and then it forgets that we translated it. We're back at 0, 0. So now our ellipse, it's in the top left corner. And then the last thing I want to do is talk about nesting push and pops. So we can actually have a push and pop within a push and pop. Let's say I wanted a rectangle either side of this square in the middle that's rotating, and I want them to rotate in opposite directions. How would I go about that? First, let's get some rectangles either side. So I'm going to have one, this is 300 pixels wide, so I'm going to say 400 pixels from that at the same height. I'm going to make it a smaller square. Then I'm going to do another rectangle on the other side, so that will just be minus 400 pixels. Cool, so now I've got some squares either side. And now let's say I want the one on the right to rotate in the same direction as this, and the one on the left to rotate in the other direction. So to do that, I can add a rotate here. Oops. Rotate R. This will just additively rotate stuff, so that's sped up the rotation of both of them. So actually what I want to do is, yeah, of course, I need to first translate to our new rotating point. So I'm going to translate to, this might get weird now because if I don't put push and pop in, but let's try it without it and see what weird stuff happens. I'm going to translate to the rectangle on the right, and then this will be at the new origin. Let's see how that looks. Missing a bracket. I've missed a comma actually, and it's told me I'm missing a bracket. Also missing some semicolons. Cool. So this one on the right is rotating correctly. We wanted it rotating the same direction as that rectangle. Our other one's doing some weird stuff. So let's fix that up with some push and pops. So I'm gonna, and actually I'm gonna use tab, highlight these and tab them all to the right, so everything's a bit clearer on what's happening. I'm going to push this new translation for this rectangle. This is a bit messy, sorry. Out, and then pop it. So now that's doing its own thing. And then if I want the other one to spin in the opposite direction, I can copy out the same thing. I'm going to delete this, sorry. Then my translate, because I want it on the left-hand side, will be negative 400. And I want it to rotate in the opposite direction. So I have to, if I go minus R, it will be reversing the effects of this rotate. So that will look like it's kind of staying on the same angle. So let's look at that. So you can see this rectangle is kind of staying upright. So I need to, for it to rotate in the opposite direction, multiply it by negative 2, and then there we go. That's the random complex thing I wanted to make in my head, and it's there. So we had to use these push and pops, otherwise we would have got these weird interactions of rotations and translations. So there you go, that's how to rotate stuff.